Good afternoon. I would like to start by saying thank you to Yanis and Sveva for having us for this conference, thanking the hosts, the whole team. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. My name is Nemeth. In my day job, I'm a type designer and typographer, mostly working with the Arabic script. And whilst I have pursued research on Arabic printing history, what we're going to present today is only tangentially related to this line of work. As a disclaimer, I have to say that the project that we want to talk about is of an unapologetically applied nature. But I'm confident that it ties in with some of the issues that were raised over the last couple of days, including and mainly the acquisition of writing, maybe iconicity, certainly the role of Unicode support, and potentially even the fit of a script to a language.
And good afternoon from my side too. Thank you also, Emanuele, for your help in the beginning. Thank you. And Sveva and Janis, thank you. I am Martin Tiefenthaler. I'm a graphic designer who also taught typography and semiotics in Vienna for almost 30 years. In 1999, together with a few friends of mine who also work in graphics, I founded the Typographic Society of Austria, the TGA, because we felt that typographic knowledge in Austria was insufficient. And since then, we have been organizing lectures by international speakers and exhibitions, as well as symposia. And in 2018, the TGA organized the symposium Lesbar, which means legible, taking a critical look at school books and the fonts used in them. After the event, the head of the Wiener Bildungsserver, this is an association of the city of Vienna that develops educational material, offered me the opportunity to design a new educational typeface. And this is where Titus comes in.
It was around the same time that my then 3-year-old son developed an interest in writing, which may be considered an occupational illness of having a type designing father. It prompted me to explore didactic fonts, and I ended up making an improved digitization of the type that was then used in Austria. And Martin and I know each other for a long time, and when I showed him my work, we quickly knew that we wanted to collaborate on this project.
Yeah, this was a great coincidence, so to say.
This was the situation when we started our work. The teachers in Austria could choose from one of two models to teach in their classes. There was the 1969 version that I still learned, and the 1995 model, which is a slightly updated take with somewhat less curls and swashes. However, and that is quite important, for the unconnected letter forms, which are consistently taught first in classes in Austrian schools, no specific model was ever provided in the Lehrplan, which is the basis, the legal basis for the curricula. Teachers and publishers of school books could choose whether to use, and I quote, Blockschrift, gemischt Antiqua, or Schulschrift, which essentially means block letters, Roman type, or school type, whatever that may be, leaving ample room for interpretation and precious little guidance or clarity. No. Okay, that's not what is intended. You should be seeing something else here. At no point, and that is quite unfortunate, did the Austrian authorities provide the fonts that implemented the official model.
That's quite a pity because they're really ugly. So
I can imagine.
Yeah, what ended up was that publishers and teachers were left to their own devices to identify and source suitable type with predictably poor results. And what happened is that homemade digitizations proliferated, bastardized versions of very basic grotesque typefaces became the de facto norm, and also even the digital versions of the cursive type was not even faithfully representing what the ministry gave as a model.
So our first approach was when children learn connected writing after being taught disconnected forms, they have to learn new letter forms and a new way of setting strokes. So from a writing ergonomics point of view, this is totally nonsensical and a waste of human potential and teaching time. So our first approach was therefore to keep the architecture the same for both fonts, thus making it easier to switch from one font to the other. Gladly. Here you see how the unconnected and the connected are formally related to each other. Above, an old writing model, and below Prima. In such a way, children are already familiar with the forms and proportions when learning the connected ones. The way the letter is written remains the same, and now the focus can be placed on the ergonomically best connection between all letters. It is a false assumption that a circle and a vertical tangent can be written more easily than a shape like the one shown here in our A and B. Of course, any form is difficult for children to learn when they are being confronted the first time with it, but the geometric abstraction that might only seem to be more childlike is less ergonomic and alien to future fast reading and writing. Often adults' interpretation of the child's world is not childlike, but childish, and infantilizing forms are offered as models. Not to mention that children are not expected to accept ugly letter forms that do not correspond that the children are also expected to accept ugly letter forms that do not correspond to any commonly used ones and none written later. Circles, for example, are considered more child-friendly than ellipses, but circles also encourage mirroring of the letters B, D, P, and Q, which may appear particularly orderly or manageable to adults, but can cause and will cause confusion in children. Prima avoids this problem, and furthermore, all letters can be written in one go, also the disconnected ones.
And the next key area that we identified for potential improvement was the regularity and evenness of spacing in the cursive model. As mentioned before, the official model had never been turned into a working type, and the existing digitizations, such as the one on screen, showed the glaring gap between theory and practice. Whilst the provided letter forms of the model may have worked individually, their limitations are apparent when used in sequence. In a typeface, we design a system where every possible combination of letters and joints has to work, because the subtle adjustments that we do whilst writing cannot easily be replicated. So without a sound strategy to address this complexity, letter forms, word images that we've heard before, and spacing may become severely compromised. And this is a problem.
This chart shows you the 6 levels at which reading is done in a purely physical sense before the meaning of what has been read is understood in the frontal cortex. So explaining this chart takes another lecture, but what has been read is, since we are blind, this is the basic thing to be shown here, since we are blind when the eye jumps from one fixation to the next, the next fixation point must already be chosen in the parafoveal area where the vision is blurred. If letter spacing is irregular, the choice is not optimal and regression saccades are caused. If there are more than 10% of regression saccades, reading is unconsciously stopped and only continued with great reluctance. Of all the ways to make a text difficult and hard to read, the most effective is to use uneven spacing. This is the model shown below here. As already said, this ensures that the eye cannot fix the next best place to fixate, making fluent reading impossible. One can imagine what this means for the motivation of children learning to read and for their ability to store word forms such as bigrams frequent prefixes and suffixes, and short words like articles in their brains. Forms that never need to be fixed again, but are skipped when the reading speed increases over the next years.
And further, no, that's a shame. Sorry for that. Our illustrations are not entirely where we wanted to be. A problem that we are seeing in many poorly done fonts for school, for learning to write, is that the way joints are formed is not thought through. So what you get is that the letter form and the connecting stroke between them are turned into one unit. And that has implications for, amongst other things, the spacing. And so we try to come up with a strategy to address this from the get-go. And that, yeah, thank you. And this problem that we're seeing where basically technical ability influences how reading and writing is taught is not exclusive to Austria. In this German model, every joining letter form has to terminate at the same height, at the X height, which imposes a modularity that is more or less alien to handwriting and directly reflects the simplification strategies of printing time. In our approach, we did not want the technical circumstances prescribe how children learn to read and write, but to develop technical solutions to facilitate that task. In Prima, joints are therefore conceived to enable ideal connections between any letter sequence. So rather than prescribing how letters have to be shaped in order to match a preconceived modular system, we developed flexible joining strokes that adapt to the context. So with this approach, we could design ergonomic connections that reflect proven manuscript practice, optimize the spacing between every letter combination, and create a model that can demonstrate continuous fluid writing as well as deliberate interruptions. Now, through this approach, joining strategies that are hidden in conventional modular fonts are made explicit and more transparent. And we would argue that this allows pupils to learn by observation and imitation and to avoid the frustration of opaque letter connections that it cannot really be written by hand. So far, more than 120 automatically inserted joints were designed to provide the malleability that we sought. And of course, in the future, for additional scripts, additional strokes may have to be conceived. Now, to come back to our starting point here, we can see again the excessively irregular spacing between various letter combinations in one of the precursor fonts, and to what degree we were able to improve on it in our design.
So our third concern was related to the common idea that cursive writing means that everything has to join up. However, it is not ergonomic to connect every letter, regardless of combination and length of the word. And therefore, adults do not this either. Here is a selection of our research of handwriting from people who have written a lot and quickly and also with intellectual rigor. It shows how the diverse ways of individual hands to deal with letter combinations. Strangely enough, connecting all letters is mandatory in educational typefaces and in its teaching. Although teachers told us before we worked on this font that children are breaking their fingers when they have to write long words. Nevertheless, children should always have access to the connections that have been tried and tested over centuries. It is now up to them whether they want to make the connecting movements on the paper or in the air. In a digital model, these freedoms have to be managed with competent technical solutions. In contrast to other school fonts, Prima does not provide joints after capitals, where the architecture and specificity of the letter forms would be compromised. Here's an example set in a common Austrian school font, showing its rigid and unchangeable form. and in contrast, the default setting of Prima cursive below. Prima offers, as already said, options for interruption after joint capital letters, after German umlauts E, Ö, and Ü, where you have to set the points while writing, and as well as after letters that are not necessarily written in one go, like T and K, and where connections could be perceived as more cumbersome than unconnected ones like G, J, R, and Y. Owing to these technical solutions, smooth joins and optional breaks are available. Every teacher can now design their worksheets and teaching materials to suit their needs and their educational goals.
And now we're coming to the Unicode support bit. Although the commission of this type originated in Vienna in Austria, we established early on that the comprehensive language support was an essential aspect of our design. Now you may think that this should be standard in our globalized digital world and hardly worth mentioning. But when it comes to schooling, unfortunately, this is not the case. In Austria, there are no officially supported fonts, and this is what you see as a result. And it comes as no surprise then that the hobbyists who digitized the model of the ministry did not make the additional effort to cater to other languages. But also in Germany, where commercial providers sell these fonts, children's names in Turkish or Polish clearly are not considered to be within their remit. Yet even in France, one of the most multi-ethnic and multilingual communities in Europe, where official fonts were commissioned by the ministry and the Ministry of Education and produced by professional type designers, languages beyond those that share French accents are ignored. And if you think that this is only due to the misplaced nationalism of government bodies, unfortunately, I have to disappoint you, because even the open source Australian school fonts that were built by Google for education don't bother with languages beyond English. With Prima, we took a radically different approach, going the extra mile for inclusive language support, as expressed, for example, in the 20 specialized joining strokes that were created specifically for the letter Schwa, as used in Azerbaijani, and as I learned yesterday, also in gender-neutral Italian.
So an important aspect of educational material is to have easy access to it. Our client was therefore happy to agree with us and our goal to make it open source. Prima is licensed with a Creative Commons license. It is permitted to use, copy, and redistribute Prima in any medium or format, as long as you name the source. Only commercial use requires a paid license. Anyone who wants to use Prima can download it from a GitHub repository, contribute to it, remix, and redistribute it. So Prima is already being taught in many schools throughout Austria with very good feedback that we get. And it was even awarded the prestigious Certificate of Typographic Excellence by the Type Directors Club, New York. So in Austria, its publication has attracted considerable interest, and even some German publishers and educators have already started using it. When we approached the design of Prima, we wanted to afford it the same care and seriousness any other typographic design requires. As a result of this attitude, we believe that Prima has aesthetic qualities that make it usable beyond the school context, which we consider a mark of distinction rarely found in other educational fonts.
But one thing that bothered us was that it was not very usable for text composition. Its lightness and proportions were designed for children's hands and to be traced in large sizes, not for continuous text. So we tried to secure additional funding to address these issues, and last year we found them at the Vienna Business Agency. So for most of this year, we've been working on its expansion in various dimensions. We designed bolder versions that make it much more broadly usable, and added variants that have more moderate extenders, as well as smaller capitals, turning Prima into a versatile type family for all kinds of didactic uses, and we believe well beyond.
Thank you very much.
I have two questions. First one, it's not completely clear to me if you have designed ligatures to implement connections between letters or a mixture of that and something else.
No, there's not a single ligature in the font. They are strokes that are individual separate elements that are based on the context inserted on the fly.
So there are individual characters that you insert between.
The individual glyphs, not
Glyphs,
characters.
okay, glyphs. Okay, fine. And second question, you mentioned the complexity of creating all the possible connections and various angles and stuff like that. Could this complexity be mitigated to some extent by the design of a custom access in open type variable forms, for instance? Or do you really have all the possible glyphs?
You mean specifically for the connections?
Yeah.
So simple open type features.
Yeah, no, but the question was whether this could be helped along by.
If you have a connection with I don't know 20 possible angles, are these 20 different glyphs or and if so, could you use a custom access in open type variable forms to just have only one?
I'm not sure how you would activate that within one word if you would need 6 different instances within the same word. I don't think there would be a feasible way of having that.
Martin.
You talked about multilingual and showed examples. Now, being able to write children's names from all kinds of languages in that font is, of course, very important. But I wanted to ask, well, this is a font designed for Austria. Now, in some other countries, maybe the letter forms taught in school are somewhat different. Are you also thinking about, or would it be possible to do adaptations for that kind of difference?
We did not want to be bound by any national curricula. Also, even in Austria, it is not official because it was commissioned by Vienna, and Vienna is separate from the rest of Austria. As in Germany, you would have a different font in every state. And so in Australia too, you have different fonts for different states. It is a complete minefield, very politically charged, and we have little way of influencing it. But yes, since it is open source, anything can be done with it on that level.
But basically, we think that our forms are the most basic ones and should be learned by everyone.
Yeah, so you talked about making the connections, but how do you feel about children's ability to learn like the individual characters? I just remember when I was learning cursive, certain letters, just the letters themselves, like the K were really complicated and like cognitively difficult, and you have to keep your finger on the page and remember how to write the whole thing in one go.
That's the reason we are offering, for example, 2 Ks. One that is strongly connected to the unconnected one, so to say, and one that can be written in within one movement. So I don't know. It's up to the pedagogical to the teacher to I don't know, to offer the possibility to every child that might use it or need it, so to say. Yeah.
Well, to add to that, that is part of the logic of having 2 related styles. We argue that if you have an A, if you learn as your first A, a shape that is a written shape rather than a printing type shape that has never been written but drawn, it helps you to get something that is ergonomical. We talk about ergonomical forms because you don't draw it, you can actually write it, and then it's easier to turn that into a connected form.
Okay.
And furthermore, this is just a model for learning to write, and then we know for sure that every individual hand will grow out of that, you know.
I have a question. Your initial B has no loop.
Yeah.
So you did studies because, well, okay, it's not my native script, but I usually start with a loop. So how come you didn't use the loop for
Well,
the initial B?
For the initial B, you don't need a loop because there's no need for a connection to the letter before the B. So therefore, you refer to the pure form of a B, like you learned in the unconnected one, and then you only set the loop because there's a letter before it. So I think, well, we think this is quite logical, and children don't have to do these extra meters on the paper, you know.
Okay.
And then the architecture stays clear. Yeah. But I know because we also do workshops with teachers, and there are also teachers of schools with kids with special needs. They really like to work with Prima. And also teachers are in the first moment, there are two B's in one word, looks different. But I know this is for anyone who learned to do a loop on the B like mandatory, wonders. But I think kids, or we also know that kids at the first moment, because the first letters they see, they have no problems with that.
And then I wanted to tease you. You have inserted all the diacritics, but have you thought of the capital SZ?
We have it.
There is one. Yeah, there is one.
Yes, there were even some requests by teachers who
So they
specifically
actually
asked.
learn it in school,
Yeah, no.
the capital SZ.
Some people must.
And I had to suffer the hate of my former arts teacher because he hates the capital SZ, and he's really mad at me that we did it. So,
He's not the only one.
yeah.
No other questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you.